I gave water to a young Apache, and now she says I'm her husband." A lone traveler moved slowly along the narrow path that cut through the desert. His steps were careful, measured, as though he were aware that one wrong move could leave him stranded in the harsh wilderness. He was a man of quiet determination, the kind who noticed small details others might miss. The way a bird rested on a cactus, the faint tracks of animals crossing the sand, the faint scent of water carried by the wind. His journey had begun in the early morning, with a pack slung over his shoulder and a canteen of water barely half full. Each step was tiring, but he pressed on, guided by the faint hope of reaching a small settlement he had heard about a day's walk ahead. Despite his preparation, the desert was unrelenting. The sun seemed to grow hotter with every passing hour, and the traveler felt the dry, cracked earth beneath his boots. His throat was parched, and sweat ran down his face, drying almost as quickly as it appeared. Yet he continued, driven by determination and the quiet knowledge that stopping could mean danger. It was then that he noticed her. At first, she seemed like a mirage, a flickering image that could disappear at any moment. But as he drew closer, the image became clearer. A young girl, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, crouched by a small rock outcrop, her head hanging low, her body trembling. Her clothes were simple and worn, and her skin glistened with sweat under the harsh sun. She looked fragile, almost lost in the vast expanse of the desert. The traveler's heart sank. He had seen many things in his life, but the sight of a child alone in such a dangerous place was almost unbearable. He hurried toward her, calling softly to make sure he did not startle her. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The girl did not respond at first. She was too weak, too exhausted to speak. Her lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. He knelt down a short distance from her, careful not to invade her space too quickly. He removed his canteen and held it out to her. "Here, drink this," he said gently. The girl looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes, unsure whether to trust him. Her gaze flicked to the canteen and back to his face. For a long moment she did nothing, and the traveler felt a pang of worry. But then, with slow, hesitant movements, she reached out and took the canteen. She drank deeply, almost greedily, until the water was gone. He offered her more from his small supply, sharing what little he had, and she drank again. As she did, he noticed the way her eyes seemed to hold both fear and gratitude. She was trembling less now, her breathing steadier, though the exhaustion was still visible. He could see the marks of dehydration on her skin, the faint bruises on her arms, and the weariness in her small frame. "I'm going to help you," he said softly, speaking in the simplest words he could think of. "You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you." The girl nodded slowly, her lips pressed together, and for the first time she gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was fragile, like a tiny flower in a barren land, but it warmed the traveler's heart. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, a quiet urgency to make sure she survived the rest of the journey. He offered her his hand to help her stand, and she took it after a moment of hesitation. Together, they began to move slowly along the path, the traveler supporting her weight whenever she faltered. The sun continued its relentless journey across the sky, casting long, shimmering shadows across the sand. He talked to her gently as they walked, telling her small stories about the land, about animals, about things that might make her feel safe and distracted from her fear. She listened quietly, occasionally answering with short, whispered words. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the crunch of sand under their feet and the occasional murmur from the girl. The traveler noticed that she seemed to be recovering slowly, regaining some of her strength. He encouraged her with soft words, praising her for each step she took. The journey was difficult, but he refused to let her see any panic in his own eyes. He had learned long ago that fear could be contagious, and he wanted her to feel courage, even in the smallest measure. As the day wore on, he began to notice small signs of life around them. The faint green of a cactus, the distant flight of a hawk, the tiny footprints of desert creatures. He pointed these things out to the girl, and she looked at them with curiosity, as though seeing the world anew. He realized that this simple act of sharing small observations was helping her regain a sense of normalcy, a sense of hope that had been lost in the heat and danger of the desert. Eventually, they found a small, shaded area beneath a rock overhang. The traveler helped the girl sit down and rested beside her. He offered her more water and some dried food from his pack. She ate slowly, still cautious, but the hunger in her eyes was evident. As she ate, he kept watch on the horizon, aware that the desert could be dangerous at any moment. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of distant smoke, the promise of life somewhere beyond the harsh landscape. The girl finally spoke a few words, her voice soft and tentative. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him with a mixture of relief and awe. The traveler smiled gently. "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "I would do it again, and I will keep helping you until we reach safety." He felt a strange sense of connection with her, a bond that went beyond words. It was a human connection, simple and pure, formed in the quiet moments of kindness and trust. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, the traveler and the girl prepared to continue their journey. He helped her to her feet, checking that her steps were steady. They moved together, side by side, each supporting the other in small ways. The traveler knew that the path ahead would be challenging, but he also knew that they would face it together. The desert was vast, but for the first time, it felt a little less lonely with another soul beside him. That evening, as they made camp under a cluster of rocks, the traveler watched the girl sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful for the first time in days. He reflected on the day's events, on how a single act of giving water had changed the course of both their lives. In that quiet desert night, under a sky filled with stars, he felt a deep sense of purpose. He had not set out to find this girl, and yet here she was, a reminder of the simple but profound impact of kindness. He resolved quietly to protect her, to guide her through the dangers of the desert, and to make sure she reached her home safely. Little did he know that this single act of compassion would lead to unexpected challenges, misunderstandings, and a bond that neither of them could have anticipated. For now, though, there was only the quiet companionship of two souls brought together by circumstance, trust, and the simplest gesture of giving water to someone in need. And so the night passed, calm and quiet, with the desert wind whispering softly through the rocks, carrying the promise of a journey that had only just begun. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a warm glow across the sand and rocks. The traveler awoke first, feeling the cool breeze against his face. He looked over at the young girl, who was still sleeping peacefully. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, a sign that she had recovered some strength overnight. The traveler smiled quietly to himself, feeling a sense of relief. It was a small victory, but an important one. He had helped her survive the desert, and now he needed to ensure she continued safely to her home. When the girl woke, she looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and gratitude. Her eyes seemed brighter than the day before, though still wary. She stretched slowly and took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The traveler offered her some water and food, which she accepted, eating slowly as she regained energy. She began to speak in broken words, sharing small details about herself. Though he did not understand her language fully, he listened carefully, trying to grasp the meaning behind her words. The effort to communicate created a quiet bond between them. As they walked together through the desert, the traveler began to notice subtle changes in the girl's behavior. She would glance at him frequently, her eyes holding a depth of gratitude that was almost overwhelming. It was clear that she felt a connection with him, a trust that went beyond words. At one point, she suddenly took his hand, holding it tightly as if afraid he might disappear. The traveler stopped, surprised by her gesture. He gently removed her small hand from his, speaking softly. "You don't have to hold my hand," he said. "We will stay together, but you can walk on your own if you want." The girl shook her head, her expression serious. Then, in her own language, she said something he did not understand. Her eyes were filled with emotion, and her voice carried a weight that made him pause. Though the words were foreign, the meaning was clear in her tone. She was declaring something important. He looked at her curiously, waiting for further explanation. She smiled shyly and repeated the phrase, pointing at him. The traveler frowned slightly, realizing that this simple act of kindness had been interpreted in a way he did not anticipate. Over the next few hours, it became clear that the girl believed they were bound together in a special way. According to her cultural understanding, saving her life and helping her in the desert meant that he now held a significant place in her life, one that went beyond friendship. She considered him her protector, her guardian, and, in her own terms, her husband. The traveler felt a mix of confusion, respect, and concern. He did not want to hurt her feelings, but he also knew that he could not accept such a role in the way she imagined. He paused under the shade of a large rock formation to think. The desert was quiet except for the occasional whisper of the wind through the rocks. He realized that this was not simply a misunderstanding. It was a reflection of the girl's culture, her beliefs, and the way she perceived the world. In her eyes, his act of kindness had created a bond that carried serious meaning. He had to be careful, he thought, to navigate this situation with respect and sensitivity. Any misstep could cause pain or confusion. The girl watched him carefully, sensing that he was thinking. She waited patiently, as if trusting him to understand her feelings. The traveler took a deep breath and decided to speak gently. "I am your friend," he said. "I helped you because you needed help. I care for you and I will protect you, but we are not married. I hope you can understand." For a moment the girl seemed confused. Her eyes widened and she hesitated, unsure how to respond. Then she nodded slowly, a small smile forming on her lips. It was clear that she did not fully understand his words, but she sensed his honesty and his intention to protect her. The traveler felt a wave of relief, knowing that he had communicated his feelings without offending her or disrespecting her culture. As they continued their journey, the traveler observed the girl more closely. She was resilient, her spirit strong despite the hardships she had faced. She walked beside him with careful steps, occasionally glancing around to observe the desert's small details, the cacti, the birds, the tiny animals that scurried across the sand. He began to teach her simple ways to navigate the terrain, pointing out safe paths and ways to find water. She listened intently, absorbing each lesson with quiet determination. The day wore on, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The desert was relentless, but the traveler and the girl pressed forward together. They encountered small challenges along the way, uneven terrain, prickly bushes, and the occasional tumble down a rocky slope. Each time the traveler helped her up, offering encouragement and praise. The girl began to gain confidence, learning that she could rely on him for guidance without losing her own strength and independence. As they rested for lunch under a cluster of rocks, the girl surprised him with a small gesture. She picked a tiny desert flower and handed it to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of pride and affection. The traveler accepted it with a warm smile, realizing that this simple act carried deep meaning in her culture. It was her way of showing gratitude and respect, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they were forming. He placed the flower carefully in his pack, feeling honored by her gesture. During the afternoon, the traveler reflected on the journey so far. He realized that helping the girl was about more than just providing water or guidance. It was about understanding, patience, and empathy. Each step they took together built trust, each word shared created understanding, and each act of kindness strengthened their connection. He felt a sense of purpose, knowing that his actions were making a real difference in her life. As the day drew to a close, the sky transformed into a canvas of warm oranges, pinks, and purples. The desert, which had seemed harsh and unforgiving in the bright sun, now felt gentle and alive in the evening light. The traveler and the girl found a small shaded area where they could rest for the night. He helped her settle down, offering water and a small portion of food. She ate quietly, her expression thoughtful, occasionally glancing at him with a look that spoke volumes. That night, as they sat beneath the open sky, the traveler told her stories about the stars. He pointed out constellations, explaining their shapes and stories in the simplest words he could find. The girl listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder. For a moment, the hardships of the day faded, replaced by curiosity and a sense of connection to the wider world. She asked questions in her own language, and he answered as best he could, using gestures and words she might understand. The night was calm, the desert wind soft, and for the first time in days, both of them felt a sense of peace. Despite the beauty of the evening, the traveler knew that challenges awaited them. The desert was vast, and their journey was far from over. But he also knew that they had taken an important step. They had begun to understand each other, to form a bond based on trust and respect. He realized that this was not just about survival. It was about learning from one another, bridging gaps between cultures, and creating a connection that would endure long after the desert had been crossed. The girl, though tired, stayed awake a little longer, looking at the stars and thinking about the traveler. She did not fully understand all of his words, but she understood his actions. He had saved her life, protected her, and guided her through the dangerous desert. In her mind, he was more than a friend. He was a figure of strength and care, someone who had become a part of her story in a way that could not be easily forgotten. As the fire they had made crackled softly, the traveler watched her quietly. He thought about the words she had said earlier, about seeing him as her husband in her cultural understanding. He understood the gravity of her declaration, even if it was different from his own perspective. He resolved to continue treating her with respect, kindness, and honesty, knowing that their journey required patience and sensitivity. The night passed quietly, the desert around them still and serene. The traveler reflected on the day, on the challenges they had overcome, and on the bond that had begun to form between them. He realized that helping her had changed something inside him as well. He felt a sense of responsibility, yes, but also a deep sense of connection, a reminder that simple acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways that were unexpected and profound. As dawn approached, the traveler and the girl prepared for another day. The desert awaited them, full of both danger and beauty, but they would face it together. Each step forward was a step of trust, understanding, and courage. And though they could not yet know what lay ahead, they knew that their journey had already transformed both of their lives in ways that would endure far beyond the sands of the desert. The desert sun rose high again, painting the sand with golden light and making the rocks sparkle in the morning glow. The traveler and the young Apache girl were already on their feet, ready to continue the long journey. Both were growing accustomed to the rhythm of the desert, the slow, careful steps, the quiet observation of every movement of the wind and every shadow that crossed the sand. Each day brought new challenges, but they faced them together, learning to rely on one another in ways they had never imagined. The traveler noticed that the girl was walking with more confidence than the day before. Her steps were steadier and she no longer clung to him as tightly. She had begun to trust her own strength, but she still glanced at him often, as though seeking silent approval. He smiled to himself. She was learning not just to survive the desert, but also to trust in her own abilities. He knew that building her confidence was just as important as helping her reach her home safely. As they moved through a narrow valley, the wind shifted, bringing with it the faint scent of water. The traveler's eyes lit up. "There might be a small spring nearby," he said softly. The girl's eyes widened in hope, and she quickened her pace slightly. Together they followed the subtle signs of life, the green of small plants, the traces of footprints, and the sound of birds in the distance. When they reached the spring, it was a small oasis, barely more than a pool surrounded by rocks and shrubs, but it was enough. The girl knelt beside the water and cupped it in her hands, drinking eagerly. The traveler watched her, glad to see her strength returning. He knelt beside her, filling his own canteen and taking a small sip. For a moment they sat quietly, simply enjoying the cool water in the heat of the day. The oasis was a small paradise, a brief moment of relief in the harsh desert. The traveler knew that moments like these were precious. They gave the girl both physical strength and hope, reminding her that the desert, while dangerous, was not without life and beauty. As they rested, the traveler spoke softly to the girl, telling her about his own experiences in the desert. He shared stories of times when he had faced danger, when he had learned to read the signs of nature, and when he had discovered the small joys hidden in the harsh landscape. She listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. Though they spoke different languages, the effort to understand one another created a bridge that was stronger than words alone. After a brief rest, they resumed their journey. The terrain grew more challenging as they climbed a series of rocky hills. Loose stones threatened to slip under their feet, and the sun beat down mercilessly. The traveler helped the girl over the larger rocks, offering his hand when she faltered and giving her small instructions on how to place her feet safely. She followed his guidance carefully, learning quickly from his experience. The traveler was impressed by her determination. Despite the exhaustion, she refused to give up. During their climb, the girl began to speak more often, asking questions about the world beyond the desert. "What is life like beyond the hills?" she asked in her own language. The traveler thought for a moment and then replied simply, "It is different. There are towns, rivers, and many people. There is both joy and struggle, but there are also lessons to be learned everywhere you go." The girl nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting curiosity and a growing sense of wonder. By midday, they reached a small plateau overlooking a vast stretch of desert. The view was breathtaking, a sea of sand and rocks stretching to the horizon. The traveler stopped to catch his breath and took in the scenery. He pointed out small details to the girl, the shadow of a distant mountain, the flight of a hawk high above, and the way the sunlight reflected off the sand in waves. She watched attentively, learning to see the beauty in a place she had once feared. As they descended from the plateau, a small sandstorm began to form in the distance. The traveler noticed the change in wind direction and knew they needed to find shelter quickly. He scanned the area and spotted a small cave tucked into the side of a hill. "This way," he said, guiding the girl toward the safety of the cave. The wind began to pick up, and grains of sand stung their skin as they hurried to reach the entrance. The girl followed closely, trusting him completely. Inside the cave, they found temporary refuge from the storm. The traveler helped the girl settle down, giving her water and letting her rest while he assessed the situation. The sandstorm raged outside, but inside the cave, there was a calm silence. The traveler knew that these moments of pause were important, not just for survival, but for building trust and understanding. The girl looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and admiration. Though she had faced many dangers in her life, the desert had taught her to recognize true kindness, and she saw it clearly in him. During the storm, the girl began to share more about her life and her family, using gestures and simple words that the traveler could understand. She spoke of her village, her parents, and her dreams. Though he could not understand every word, he listened carefully, piecing together the meaning from her expressions and tone. He realized that these conversations were helping her heal from the fear and exhaustion she had felt earlier. She was beginning to trust him not just as a protector, but as a companion and guide. When the storm finally passed, they emerged from the cave to a desert washed clean by the wind. The sand was cooler, and the air felt fresh. The traveler and the girl continued their journey, each step feeling lighter after the brief respite. Along the way, they encountered small signs of wildlife: lizards darting across rocks, birds calling in the distance, and even traces of larger animals moving quietly through the desert. The traveler taught the girl how to recognize these signs, explaining which were safe and which might signal danger. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail with growing confidence. As evening approached, the traveler and the girl found a small clearing where they could rest. He set up a simple camp, creating a space for them to eat and rest safely. The girl helped by gathering small sticks for a fire, her movements careful and deliberate. Once the fire was lit, they sat together, sharing a modest meal. The traveler spoke softly about the stars, pointing out the constellations and telling stories from his own culture. The girl listened, enchanted by the tales and by the connection they shared through the quiet magic of the desert night. During their conversation, the girl turned to him and spoke again in her own language. This time, the traveler sensed a deeper emotion in her words. She was reaffirming the bond they shared, acknowledging the trust and care he had shown her. Though he could not fully understand every word, he felt the meaning clearly. He smiled and nodded, showing her that he respected her feelings while maintaining the boundaries he knew were necessary. The night passed peacefully, with the desert wind whispering softly through the rocks. The traveler kept watch, ensuring that they were safe, while the girl slept quietly beside him. He thought about the journey so far and realized how much he had learned from her as well. She had shown courage, resilience, and an openness to trust that was rare in the harsh world they both navigated. He felt a growing admiration for her strength and a deep sense of responsibility to ensure her safety. As dawn broke again, they prepared for another day of travel. The traveler helped the girl gather her belongings, filling their water supply and packing the small amount of food they had left. Together, they faced the desert once more, moving forward with determination and hope. Each step strengthened their bond, and each shared experience deepened their understanding of one another. The traveler knew that the journey ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that they would face it together, learning from each challenge and growing stronger with every obstacle overcome. Throughout the day, the traveler continued to teach the girl practical skills for survival: how to find water, how to read the signs of the land, and how to protect herself from the dangers of the desert. She learned quickly, her confidence growing with every lesson. At the same time, he encouraged her curiosity and imagination, sharing stories of life beyond the desert and encouraging her to dream of possibilities she had never considered before. By evening, they reached a small ridge overlooking a distant valley. The sight was breathtaking, a mix of green and brown, dotted with small streams and patches of desert flowers. The traveler and the girl paused, taking in the beauty of the world beyond the harsh desert they had crossed together. For a moment there was no fear, no exhaustion, only the quiet wonder of two souls connected by trust, kindness, and shared experience. As night fell, they set up camp once again, and the traveler reflected on the day's journey. He realized that helping the girl was no longer just about guiding her to safety. It was about forming a lasting bond, one built on mutual respect, understanding, and care. He knew that the road ahead would hold more challenges, but he also knew that they were not facing it alone. Together, they had discovered strength, hope, and the power of human connection in the vast, unforgiving desert. And so, under the vast night sky filled with stars, the traveler and the young Apache girl rested, ready to face the next day with courage, trust, and a bond that was growing stronger with every passing hour. The traveler and the young Apache girl had journeyed for many days through the vast desert, facing harsh sun, rough terrain, and endless stretches of sand. Each day had tested their strength, patience, and courage. But finally, as the sun began to climb high in the morning sky, they reached the edge of a valley where the girls' community lived. The traveler paused at the top of a small hill, looking down at the collection of huts and people moving about. Relief and a touch of nervousness filled him. The journey was almost over, but a new challenge awaited. The girl's steps quickened as she recognized familiar sights, her home, her friends, and the people she had been separated from. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, but there was also a nervous tension in her posture. She had survived the desert and relied on the traveler for guidance, but now she faced the scrutiny of her own community. She turned to the traveler, her gaze full of trust and anticipation. "Thank you," she said softly in her language. Though he did not understand every word, he felt its meaning clearly and nodded with a warm smile. As they approached the community, people began to notice them. The girl ran ahead, calling out to her family, who came quickly to meet her. Her parents' faces showed relief, joy, and a hint of worry. The traveler followed slowly behind, aware that his presence might be questioned. He was not from their community, and the elders would naturally want to understand his intentions. His heart beat faster as he prepared to explain himself, hoping that the trust he had built with the girl would help them understand his role. The girl introduced him carefully, pointing at him and speaking in her language. The traveler could see the seriousness in her eyes. She was telling her parents and the elders that he had saved her life and guided her safely through the desert. In her cultural understanding, this meant something very important. She had declared him her protector and, in her own words, her husband. The traveler paused, feeling the weight of her declaration. He had expected gratitude, but not this deep and binding connection. The elders stepped forward, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. They questioned the traveler, asking about his intentions and his actions in the desert. He spoke calmly and honestly, explaining that he had found the girl in danger, had given her water, and had helped her survive. He stressed that his actions came from a place of kindness and respect, not from any expectation of reward or obligation. He tried to convey his words with care, aware of the delicate nature of the situation. The girl's parents listened closely, their expressions softening as they saw the sincerity in his eyes. They realized that he had indeed risked his own safety to help their child, guiding her through the harsh desert with patience and care. Yet there was still a question that weighed heavily on everyone: the girl's declaration of him as her husband. This was not a trivial matter in their culture. It carried responsibilities, expectations, and social implications that could not be ignored. The traveler took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "I care for your daughter," he said slowly, "and I will always protect her, but I am not her husband in the way you might understand. I hope you can respect that, just as I respect your culture and traditions." He spoke with humility and honesty, knowing that he had to maintain both respect and clarity. The elders exchanged quiet words among themselves, weighing his honesty against the girl's declaration and the situation they now faced. The girl watched the conversation closely, her small hands gripping the traveler's arm for reassurance. She sensed the tension, but also trusted him to speak the truth with respect. She did not fully understand the complexities of the cultural expectations being discussed, but she knew that he had cared for her when she was vulnerable. In her mind, he was still her protector, and she hoped the elders would recognize the value of his guidance and courage. After some discussion, the elders approached the traveler. Their voices were calm but firm, filled with the wisdom of experience. They explained that while his actions had indeed saved the girl, the declaration of him as her husband was a matter of cultural interpretation. In their eyes, his bravery and care deserved recognition, but it did not automatically fulfill the social and familial obligations that marriage entailed. The traveler listened carefully, nodding in understanding. He realized that navigating this situation required patience, humility, and respect for their customs. The girl's parents stepped forward next. They spoke softly to her, explaining that while they were grateful for the traveler's help, the idea of him being her husband needed careful thought. The girl listened, her eyes wide with a mix of confusion and sadness. She had never meant to cause conflict. She only wanted to show her gratitude and honor the trust she felt in the traveler. The traveler knelt beside her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. He spoke softly, reassuring her without undermining her feelings. "It is okay," he said. "Your gratitude is important and it is enough. We will find a way that respects everyone." Over the next few hours, the traveler worked carefully with the girl, her parents, and the elders to explain his perspective. He emphasized that his actions came from kindness and concern, not from a desire to claim any role in her life beyond protection and guidance. He also listened to their concerns, showing respect for their traditions and values. The discussion was long and sometimes tense, but it was also filled with moments of understanding and recognition. Everyone could see that the traveler's intentions were genuine. During this time, the girl observed quietly, learning how adults resolved conflicts with honesty, respect, and communication. She realized that the bond she felt with the traveler did not have to be defined by a title or ceremony. It could exist in the trust, care, and shared experiences they had built together. This realization brought her a sense of calm. She understood that her feelings of gratitude and admiration could coexist with the traveler's need to respect cultural boundaries. By evening, a resolution began to take shape. The elders, after much discussion, acknowledged the traveler's bravery and care. They allowed the girl to continue recognizing him as a protector and trusted companion, while also making it clear that he would not assume the social role of husband. This compromise honored both the traveler's boundaries and the girl's cultural understanding of gratitude and trust. The girl's parents smiled with relief, grateful that the situation had been handled with respect and fairness. The traveler felt a deep sense of relief as well. He had feared offending the girl's community or damaging the trust he had built with her. But now he could see that honesty, patience, and respect had created a bridge of understanding. He looked at the girl, who was watching him with a quiet smile, and realized that their bond was stronger than ever. It was a bond built not on obligation, but on mutual respect, trust, and care. That night, as they sat by a small fire outside the girl's home, the traveler reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the desert to the community, every step had been a lesson in patience, courage, and understanding. He realized that true connection did not come from titles or declarations, but from actions and empathy. The girl, sensing his thoughts, leaned slightly toward him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and admiration. In that quiet moment, they shared an unspoken understanding. They had faced challenges together and had built something meaningful that could not be erased. Over the following days, the traveler helped the girl settle back into her community. He taught her practical skills he had learned in the desert, shared stories from his own experiences, and helped her navigate small challenges with confidence. She, in turn, shared her knowledge of her community, her traditions, and the ways of her people. Together, they continued to learn from one another, bridging the gap between their worlds with patience, curiosity, and respect. The community gradually accepted the traveler as a trusted friend, someone who had shown courage, kindness, and integrity. The girl's declaration of him as her husband became a quiet story, remembered with smiles and gratitude rather than confusion or conflict. The traveler and the girl maintained their bond, not as husband and wife, but as companions and friends united by shared experience, trust, and care. Through it all, the traveler reflected on the lessons he had learned. He understood that helping someone was never just about the act itself. It was about respect, empathy, and understanding the context in which kindness was received. He realized that cultural differences could create misunderstandings, but they could also create opportunities for learning and growth. The girl had taught him patience, resilience, and the importance of seeing the world through another's eyes. As the sun set over the valley, casting warm orange and purple hues across the community, the traveler felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The journey had been difficult, the challenges many, but the reward was more than survival, it was connection. He had discovered that true kindness carried weight, that actions could have deep and lasting meaning, and that respect and honesty could bridge even the widest gaps between people and cultures. The girl, now safe and surrounded by her family, looked at the traveler with a mixture of trust and admiration. Though they had faced misunderstandings and challenges, their bond had grown stronger with every step, every conversation, and every act of care. The traveler knew that their story was far from over, but he also knew that they had created something lasting, a friendship rooted in respect, compassion, and shared experience. That night, under a sky full of stars, the traveler and the girl rested once more. The desert and the community had tested them in different ways, but they had faced every challenge together. In the quiet of the evening, there was a profound sense of peace. They had navigated misunderstanding, cultural differences, and the challenges of survival, and had emerged with trust, connection, and a bond that would endure far beyond the desert and the valley. The days that followed the traveler's arrival in the young Apache girls' community were filled with quiet routines, learning, and small moments of connection. The traveler had stayed by her side not because of any obligation, but because he genuinely cared for her well-being. Each morning, he helped her prepare for the day, teaching her small lessons he had learned in his own journeys: how to find clean water, how to read the subtle signs of nature, and how to protect herself in unexpected situations. She listened intently, absorbing every piece of advice with a seriousness that impressed him. The girl, in turn, shared her world with him. She showed him how her people lived, their customs, and the daily rhythms of their lives. She introduced him to her friends, her family, and the small animals that roamed near their huts. Each day, the traveler marveled at her courage, her intelligence, and her unyielding curiosity. Despite the hardships she had faced in the desert, she approached life with a bright spirit and an open heart. He realized that her resilience was inspiring, and he felt grateful that he had been able to guide her safely back to this place. Though the girl had once referred to him as her husband, the traveler respected the boundaries they had agreed upon. He never pushed her or sought to claim a role in her life, beyond being a protector, guide, and friend. Instead, he focused on building trust and showing her that kindness and care could exist without expectation or obligation. This approach deepened their bond in a way that was quiet but powerful. She knew she could rely on him, and he knew he could trust her to be brave, thoughtful, and honest. As the days turned into weeks, the traveler became an accepted part of the community. He helped with daily tasks when needed, shared stories of the world beyond the valley, and offered guidance during small challenges. The elders, once cautious of his presence, came to appreciate his integrity and the respect he showed for their customs. They saw how he had nurtured the girl's confidence and helped her regain strength and courage after the desert ordeal. Gradually, any tension or doubt faded, replaced by respect and understanding. One afternoon, the traveler and the girl decided to explore the hills surrounding the community. The girl led the way, pointing out familiar landmarks and showing him the paths she had taken as a child. She laughed freely as they climbed small rocks and jumped over creeks, her energy seeming endless. The traveler smiled at her joy, realizing that this was a new chapter in their journey, not one defined by danger or misunderstanding, but by friendship, learning, and shared experience. As they reached a quiet clearing, the girl paused to rest, sitting beneath the shade of a large tree. She looked at the traveler, her eyes reflecting curiosity and admiration. "You stayed with me," she said softly, her words carrying a depth of feeling. "Even when it was hard." The traveler nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning behind her words. "I stayed because you are important," he replied gently, "because helping you was the right thing to do, and because I wanted to." The girl smiled, leaning back against the tree trunk. She had learned so much during their time together, not just about survival or the desert, but about trust, kindness, and human connection. She realized that a single act of compassion could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. The traveler had saved her life, yes, but he had also shown her the value of honesty, patience, and empathy. She felt a quiet gratitude that could not be fully expressed in words. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the valley in shades of gold and pink, the traveler and the girl walked back toward the community. Along the way, they spoke of small dreams, future plans, and things they hoped to learn. The traveler encouraged her curiosity, answering questions about the wider world and sharing stories from his own experiences. The girl listened with fascination, imagining places and possibilities beyond the valley. In this moment, they were not bound by misunderstandings or cultural differences. They were simply two people learning from one another, connected by trust and care. Back in the village, the traveler helped the girl prepare for the evening meal. She showed him how to arrange food and water, teaching him small traditions and practices of her people. He followed her instructions carefully, laughing gently when he made minor mistakes. The warmth of the community surrounded them, a stark contrast to the harsh solitude of the desert they had crossed together. The traveler realized that while the desert had tested their strength, the community now offered them the comfort of connection, shared life, and belonging. That night after the meal, they sat by a small fire outside the girl's home. The stars stretched across the sky in a glittering expanse, and the traveler found himself reflecting on the journey they had shared. From the moment he had found her struggling in the desert to this quiet evening under the stars, their lives had intertwined in ways neither of them could have anticipated. He thought about the lessons learned, the challenges overcome, and the trust they had built. He realized that this journey had changed him as much as it had changed her. The girl, sensing his thoughts, spoke softly. "I will never forget you," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "You saved me and you stayed with me." The traveler smiled, touched by her words. "And I will never forget you," he replied. "You were brave and strong. You taught me just as much as I taught you." For a moment the world seemed to pause around them, the fire flickering gently, the wind whispering softly, the stars glowing above. In that silence, there was a profound sense of connection and understanding, a bond that would endure far beyond the challenges they had faced. Over the following weeks, the traveler continued to support the girl and her community, helping when needed but always respecting their ways. He saw the girl grow more confident, more independent, and more aware of the world around her. She explored, learned, and laughed freely, her spirit unburdened by fear. The traveler took pride in her progress, knowing that the trust and guidance they had shared had contributed to her growth. He also learned to appreciate the strength of the community, their traditions, and the way they nurtured and protected their own. One morning, as they walked together near the outskirts of the valley, the girl stopped and turned to him. "I will always remember you," she said again, this time in a tone that carried both gratitude and respect. The traveler nodded, understanding that their bond was more than a simple friendship. It was a connection forged through hardship, trust, and care. "And I will always remember you," he replied. "You showed me courage, kindness, and the power of trust. That is something I will carry with me forever." The girl smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. She had learned an important truth. that human connection could transcend fear, distance, and cultural differences. She had learned that gratitude could be expressed in ways that honored both herself and the traveler. And she had learned that a single act of kindness, a drink of water, a helping hand, a guiding presence, could change the course of a life. As the sun set that evening, casting a golden glow over the valley, the traveler and the girl sat quietly, watching the world around them. The journey through the desert was behind them, and the community had embraced both of them in their own way. There was no need for grand gestures or declarations. The bond they shared was quiet, steady, and enduring. It was a bond built on trust, respect, and shared experience, one that neither time nor distance could diminish. In the weeks that followed, the traveler prepared to leave the community. He had completed the role he had taken on, guiding the girl safely back to her home and helping her regain strength and confidence. Though he would continue his own journey elsewhere, the connection they had built would remain. The girl and her family expressed their gratitude, offering small gifts, kind words, and heartfelt farewells. The traveler accepted them with humility, understanding that the true reward was the bond itself, not any tangible recognition. On the day of his departure, the girl ran to him and hugged his arm tightly. "Thank you," she said simply, her voice filled with emotion. The traveler knelt down, meeting her gaze. "You are brave, strong, and wise," he replied. "Remember what we have shared and continue to trust yourself. You can face anything." She nodded, tears in her eyes, and released his arm. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, knowing that their lives had been changed forever by this journey. As he walked away, the traveler turned back once more. The girl waved, her smile steady and bright despite the sadness of farewell. He waved in return, feeling a mixture of pride, gratitude, and hope. The desert had tested them, the journey had challenged them, and cultural differences had created misunderstandings. But through it all, they had formed a bond that transcended fear, distance, and expectation. The traveler continued on his path, carrying with him the lessons of courage, empathy, and human connection. He knew that he would encounter many more people and challenges in his life, but the memory of the young Apache girl and the trust they had built together would remain a guiding light. Meanwhile, the girl returned to her daily life, her spirit stronger, her heart full of gratitude, and her mind enriched by the experiences she had shared with the traveler. Their story became one of quiet inspiration in the community, a tale of survival, kindness, and understanding. Parents would tell their children about the traveler who had saved the girl, emphasizing the values of trust, compassion, and respect for others. The girl herself carried the lessons with her, growing into a wise and confident young woman who never forgot the man who had given her water in the desert, and through that act, changed the course of her life. And so, under the wide sky and the watchful stars, their journey came to a natural and heartfelt conclusion. It was not marked by ceremony or title, but by the enduring bond of shared experience, empathy, and mutual respect. The traveler and the young Apache girl had faced the desert, navigated cultural understanding, and built a friendship that would last a lifetime, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and trust.